Welcome to my little corner of this great big crazy world, where we can laugh and play until reality comes unfurled.
Hello and welcome
I'll
to
be-
Corey's Corner.
I'll
Hey,
be here
hey.
listening until I want to hear you speak your piece. I'm still getting used to you being beardless.
I know. A lot of people are. There's a little bit of echo coming from your feed
Okay,
there,
so
Lester.
let me go ahead and I'll adjust that. Yeah.
All right. Well, I hope everyone is doing well on this wonderful Monday morning. Yay, Monday, start of the week. Fun. Anyway, joining us today for our wonderful talk on trauma for this Mental Health Monday is Lester, the Skeptic Tank. How you doing, buddy?
Long time no see. I'm doing all right, hanging in there. Kind of maintaining my excitement or controlling it rather after the Niners clinched the berth in the Super Bowl. So can't complain.
Sports ball. Yeah. I heard that people were excited about that. So that's cool. I'm not a huge sports ball person, so
Yeah.
I apologize to all my sports friends out there, but sports ball, man. Yeah. So Lester, how was your weekend? Other than sports ball?
Mine was pretty good. I mean, just was able to get some things done finally around my apartment, do some chores, except for a brain fart where I had my laundry key broken into the door lock when I tried to take it out. So it's like,
Yeah, that sucks. I hate it when that happens. I had that happen to my car one time. And I'm like, well, and of course I was a teenager and had absolutely no idea that I should have an extra key for my car. So it was like, well, now I got to learn how to break into a car. Good stuff. But anyway, let's say hi to the chat real quick. Just real quick, like, hail to Vince Womack. He says, don't think I'll still be awake by the time of the stream, although with my body, you'll never really know. Well, hail to you, sir, and I hope you get sleep over watching me. Honestly, sleep is important. We kind of need it to function correctly. And of course, we have Christian Delorme. Hail, he says, bonjour. Bonjour, sir. I hope you are doing very well today. I am looking forward to Wednesday for part 2 of the Rush stream, talking about everything from Brain Just Broke, Moving Pictures onward. Yes. And in case you guys aren't aware, Moving Pictures is one of their biggest, if not the biggest album that they released. Lots of very well-known songs on that. Make sure you catch us Wednesday at 4 p.m. Mountain Time, 6 p.m. Eastern, and you can do the math on the rest. Yeah. But anyway, so trauma is something that every person, regardless of where you come from, has to deal with at some point. Now, some people deal with extreme, excessive trauma, and other people deal with fairly minimal trauma. I won't say minor, because minor says it's not important, and that's not the right term to use in this case. Now, for the purposes of this discussion and this talk, trauma is an adverse experience that causes lasting and impactful negative consequences in your life. And of course, this can present anywhere from basic trauma response that you see in like a phobia, where you see something and you go, oh my gosh, and all the way up to post-traumatic stress disorder, both military and non-military post-traumatic stress, which, of course, we'll get into as we get into the show. Joining us also is Jason Fox. Hello, my lovely Nordic friend. How are you?
Hey, long time no see, people. How are you?
Good. How are you doing, sir?
Doing pretty well. Just been watching wrestling most of the day because it was a big Royal Rumble, and that was. So I've been watching that, and it's not bad. It was fun.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I used to enjoy wrestling.
Yeah, I still do. It's up and downs, of course. And I hate to say this, it's like I don't like Logan Paul in real life, but as a wrestler, he is good. As a wrestler, he's good. That's his, what do you say? He should just stick with that because he really goes 110% into it. And
Nice.
the match he just did, that it became so real that they got really fucking hurt. Blood and everything, and he was totally out of breath after the match because he put 110% in it. So it's like,
Nice.
stop YouTubing, stop everything else you do, Logan, because none of us really want that. Just continue with wrestling. That's your thing.
Right? Hail to the snail, Snail Messiah. He says, I am 3 minutes late. Please start over. No.
No.
And hail to Prismatics, who says,
Oh yeah,
boo, Jason.
he was watching with me.
Boo this man. Anyway, no, I'm kidding. But on to the fun discussion of trauma. Now, what brought this on for me, I was originally going to talk about the therapeutic process of thought stopping today, but then I saw this meme pop up on Reddit.
Oh.
And it says, it's time for you to look inward and begin asking yourself the real questions. Why does PTSD have to give a stronger feeling than nostalgia? Now, I will answer this question directly, and then we'll get into trauma as a whole. But the reason trauma, or PTSD specifically, hits harder than nostalgia is because it's kind of like a survival response gone wrong.
Yep.
So way back in the ancient times, when our trauma was mostly related to whether or not we were actually going to die, these types of things were encoded into us so we could remember them more clearly and avoid dangerous situations in the future. Now, as time has moved on, we've come to a place of what I will call relative safety, where we're not in as much mortal danger, especially in the developed worlds, as we used to be. So our brains, still being biologically programmed to seek out negative stimuli for the purpose of protection, we now latch on and give greater significance to things that might not have actually been traumatic in the past, such as somebody using your dead name on a social media thing. If that's traumatic for you, get fucked. But anyway, and that's all I have. I'm not going to be nice about this. I'm not nice about anything. I'm not nice about trauma.
No.
Okay, I'll be nice about trauma when it's legit, significant trauma.
Yeah.
But nowadays we use the same coding processes for these less severe events that we used to for survival instances, and this causes rapid response. And normally this would protect us from further harm. But these days, since the harm is actually internal most of the time, when we recall the events of the trauma, it actually makes us relive it. It reopens the wounds, if you will, and it pushes us into a traumatic response. Now, the problem that I have with modern day is it's an abused term, trauma.
Oh, it is. If you look at Twitter and social media, you have people like have in their bio PTSD, bipolar, and pronouns. Well, it's like, no, that's not how it works, dude. That's
right. See, and the problem that I have with that is those people are along the same lines as what Jason would call the trans trenders. They're people looking for attention more so than actually suffering from a mental illness. Some people choose to exacerbate their traumatic responses in order for the attention. Whether they do it consciously or otherwise is a completely different discussion, because that has to go down with how they were programmed as an individual to respond to all kinds of shit. I know, Prismatics, it's crazy. But the reality of modern day trauma is that it exists most of the time because people refuse to take the proper steps to deal with it, or they didn't take the proper developmental path to be psychologically hardy enough to cope with everyday shit. Now, I will use some self-disclosure to just get the ball rolling on the trauma talk here. When I was 17 years old, I was just having a normal day. My dad calls me from the bathroom. He says, Corey, call 911. And I'm like, okay. So I call 911. I go over to the bathroom to see what's going on, and the entire bathroom is literally covered in blood.
Mm.
My dad is down on his knees, vomiting said blood everywhere.
Okay.
Right? Now, 17, never dealt with anything like this in my entire life.
Mm.
And I'm on the phone with 911, freaking the fuck out. And, I'm sitting here watching my father, who in my mind is currently bleeding to death internally.
Yeah.
And, the paramedics come, they get him out, they get him off to the hospital. And of course, I'm not allowed to come per my father's orders. And so I'm left in this house, in this apartment, with a bathroom full of my father's blood all over the place. My instant response is to clean.
Okay.
It's one of the reasons I'm still a janitor, because I found catharsis in it. But I cleaned up my own father's blood from everywhere. It was on the sink, it was on the walls, it was all over the toilet, in the bathtub, everywhere that you could possibly imagine him getting blood, it was there.
Yeah.
It took me 3.5 hours to clean up all of the blood that was in the bathroom. And I didn't hear from them for another 2.5 hours after the fact. This is like 6 hours worth of waiting to figure out whether or not my father's even alive. Right.
Mm.
And of course, time goes on. My mom gets back from the hospital because she left work to go be with dad, who was chronically ill, by the way. So that's compounding existing issues. And she gets home and she tells me that he had a bad reaction to some food and he had thrown it up, and what it had done is ripped open his entire esophagus.
Oh.
And so it was bleeding down into his stomach, and et cetera, et cetera. And to this day, whenever I find blood in a bathroom, I start to feel the tightness in my chest, and I start to respond a little bit to this. Okay, so I'm familiar with various types of trauma, and that's just one of the examples. I've had numerous other examples that I could use, but most of the time, trauma, like in this case, is an unexpected and unplanned for event that your mind then has to rapidly start processing.
Okay.
And the problem with that is, depending on your age and various other things, your brain doesn't process the information completely or correctly. When you see a bathroom full of blood, your initial thought is going to be someone is grievously injured and possibly dying. When it's someone close to you, you have that response that goes, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. Like if it was somebody else, I probably would have been able to handle the situation perfectly fine. And that's where, context of the trauma matters as well.
Yeah. Context is always important, and what you have experienced and all that.
And there's a lot of modern day stuff that people are viewing as traumatic that aren't necessarily as bad as people let on. Again, dead naming, whatever you want to call it, is another one of those things that I'm gonna probably harp on pretty bad.
And I will say with that, because I changed my name. I had a different name, of course, before I was named the Jason name. And yeah, I've been with family members that have used my old name with an accident many times, but I don't get mad at it. I just correct them, but I'm never getting mad. I'm like, yeah, it's fine. You guys also know me as that name because that's what you used to call me. So it's like, it doesn't matter. It's nothing dangerous with it. It's like whatever. I would just try to correct it. That's it. That's the whole conversation is about. Like when I celebrated Christmas now, my uncle, he did dead name me a couple of times, and I didn't get mad, and we just made a funny situation out of it. I just mocked him just for funs of it. We just had fun with it, And I don't understand, why shall you be so fucking sad about it? If people knew as that name before, that can happen. That's normal. It's nothing traumatic about it, and they don't mean it to be mean or anything, but a lot of people, they are used to use the old name.
Yeah, and one of the things about real quick, I'll say hail to Nate D. What is up, buddy? Glad to see you here. But so a lot of the trauma responses we see in modern society, and this is my personal opinion, not based on any professional credentials I have or anything. I'm not an expert in this in any way, shape, or form, but it comes down to parenting styles and how people were raised.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel that a lot of current trauma response that we see from especially younger generations is the result of either negligent parenting or overprotective parenting, coddling and such.
Yeah.
If you don't
And the music
allow
you let them listen to. A lot of the music you let them listen to that just talks
that too,
about suicide and PTSD and other
Mhm.
stuff. Yep.
yeah, and so like that's a huge portion of where modern day trauma is coming from. And the problem with that is we all have digital babysitters, more or less.
Okay.
And most modern parents, most, not all, will absolutely default to just play on your phone. Go play video games, watch a
Yeah.
movie, whatever. Let me do the everyday stuff so I can,
Yeah. And then
function
kids
as an
are
adult.
losing one of the most important things of being a kid. Go outside playing, being
Yep.
with friends and all that. Not just be online all the time and yeah.
And experiencing actual hardships that come along with
Yep.
situations like that, because
Yep.
we were all kids and we all went out and did stupid shit
Yeah,
and
all the
saw
time.
things that we weren't supposed to see. And some of us
Mhm.
got hurt really badly. Some of us, got into situations that completely changed the trajectory
Yep.
of our lives. But the problem there is that when modern day kids run into something like that, instead of talking to their parents who are experienced in life, hopefully,
Mhm.
they go online and they start looking for people to either validate the experience
Yeah.
or fix the problem.
Yeah, and then a lot of them also go on Reddit and other websites and start reading about others, and it's not the right way, in my opinion. That's not how kids are gonna. If you're a parent, take care of your child, and let them be outside, let them play, let them learn. Like I have broken so many parts of my body because I was stupid to do stuff. I got a stone in my head, broken my hands a couple of times. I fucked up
Mhm.
my back. But I was a kid just playing around, having fun. I liked to do stupid shit as a kid, and I learned from it, and it makes you a better person when you grow up. You have experience, and it's important when you are a kid. You will have that experience the rest of your life too.
Yeah. I think what helped me because, uh, to my mom's credit, yeah, she would yell at me and she would do the Asian mom thing. And, and I'm sure if you know some Asian people,
Yeah, I've heard a lot of stories of my
yeah,
Asian friends.
so the discipline, but to her credit, we had heart to hearts even when I was a kid,
Yeah,
and and if not for that, I could easily have gotten into whatever you want to call it, a shell, or I would have probably reacted worse than I already did. Kids are gonna be kids. They're gonna be a little rebellious, and they're gonna have backlash. Parents go back and forth, but I wouldn't replicate the way. Oh, no damage. But I would say if not for that, I I like I said, I'm not gonna replicate exactly what my mom did, but at least I understood what she had in mind.
yeah, and
Right.
where
It's
it comes from and everything.
so it's like I understand, but I would not. I would change certain things because even my side job where I manage certain personalities,
Mm,
and especially knowing these dudes I help give meals to, they are taking meds, but at the same time, there's a certain level of which I don't know what you would call it, Corey, but there seems to be a level of personal accountability. Like you get the sense that even though they're medicated to a degree, that they can follow instruction
Mhm.
and
yeah,
I don't know if it's primordial, but if they know there's something at stake, just like a child, and these people I help, they range from 30-year-old to 80. And so the 80-year-old, I put something in front of him. So I put something at stake for him, and he
Mm,
understands that. If he disobeys a command,
mm,
I take away his cigarettes. And he
yep.
understands that whole dynamic of consequence and action.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it's like, on one level, there are what I call clinical levels of mental illness
Mhm.
versus, I like to say that I'm in a funk, I'm in a weird headspace. Not exactly clinical, but I know I'm not exactly where I need to be to function, or I just feel something's off.
Right.
Yep.
And it's like, it's that tension that people have with, and I've spoken to other people on other streams where people were given certain medications and they were urged to keep taking that medication, even though for themselves they have this weird awareness that the medication is not helping me. It's actually making me feel worse. And then when you talk
Yep.
about a lot of veterans with real PTSD, and you see the stuff surrounding CTE with the NFL, and of course that whole thing blew up. But a lot of folks are saying, "I'm just not feeling right. You give me this medication, and
Yep.
they still keep going." Like, one even said the medication he was on is what gave him his diabetes, because no one told him that was a side effect. So it's
Okay.
that
Yep.
the tension between, there's something not right mentally, psychologically, whatever you want to use, whatever buzzword, and you want to treat that at a clinical level. But then there's also this interesting human element that, I don't know, you might want to call it spiritual or whatever, that primordially they know certain things, and there is a change of mind that occurs.
Right.
So that's the
Yep.
that's the tricky thing with the human condition, because
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
the importance in differentiating between these is when something is clinically significant, it causes marked and significant impairment in at least one area of your life.
Okay.
For instance, stepping away from trauma, if you have ADHD, it's clinically significant when it starts impairing your ability to do your job or focus at
Mm,
school
Right.
or maintain meaningful relationships, depending on the severity of said
Yep.
disorder.
Right.
With depression, for instance, if it's clinically impacting you, then that means it's probably having an effect on your weight, your sleep habit, your sociability,
It does.
your ability to process information, things like that. Now, when it comes to trauma, it becomes clinically significant when the impairment um, directly impacts your ability to function on a day-to-day.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, this looks different for various people.
Right.
For
Yep.
instance, someone with a low-level trauma that isn't properly mitigated may experience the same symptoms of depression and anxiety at the same time.
Okay.
Mm,
And the individual may think that it's depression or anxiety, and they'll go seek treatment for that. But because of the lack of disclosure that happens with every single person,
Mm-hmm.
they don't openly recognize that there's actually a traumatic stimuli that's causing this to happen.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the time, like, this is one of the reasons that rape is so highly contested a lot of the times, is because there's so many different types of trauma response to rape
Uh-huh.
that a lot of
yep.
people took a really long time to notice the clinical significance of it being a traumatic event. Now, obviously, people who have been through this experience know that it's traumatic, but
Yep.
people who don't understand every aspect of the violation will probably minimize it. And most of the time, they will discount some of the experience as being a response to the trauma, such as weight loss due to appetite decrease, things like
Yep.
that. That is a part of a traumatic response.
Yep.
Now, in today's world, I'm actually going to get a comment from Snail Messiah on this one. He says, I once walked in on my dad eating my mom, and they were not, nor have they ever been, cannibals, which would have been a much better situation to walk in
Oh.
on. Yeah.
Oh God.
The type of trauma you experience matters. But What happens after the fact
Yep.
is truly what's important. Now, if you experience a traumatic event and then you are directly demonized for your response to it, that
Mhm.
will increase the effects of the trauma and decrease your likelihood of help seeking behavior. You'll
Yep.
isolate more often.
Oh, you do.
Now, if you have that traumatic response to something and it is able to be mitigated through explanations or through future experiences and stuff like that, the trauma obviously becomes less impactful, but that doesn't mean it's gone. For
Mhm.
instance, Snail Messiah, like, just to keep this on his comment, if that wasn't mitigated,
Hmm.
he could quite possibly not enjoy eating, if you know what I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
because
exactly,
it's
exactly.
automatic trigger, for lack of a better term, of the trauma
Yeah,
that he saw. And trust me, that's fucking traumatic. If you're walking in on
yeah,
your parents on something like that, that's
yeah,
trauma. But he also says that changing your name is a far cry from changing sex and full absorbing of new, more or less consolidated identity. See, and that's the thing. Okay, an individual who is going for sex reassignment, let's say, is concerned with far more meaningful things than their name.
Okay.
And an individual who actually wishes to undergo this process goes to therapy and starts to understand the process and their thought patterns that allow them to internalize
yeah,
who they want to be while simultaneously desensitizing themselves to the stigma that's going to be caused by this process. And individuals who successfully go through these types of things continue the therapy after the transition so that they can further adjust to their new living situation. The reason that we bring up dead naming and stuff like that for trauma is because a lot of trans trenders these days change their name and expect you to call them the rainbow unicorn or some stupid
yeah.
fucking shit like that,
Every single thing.
but they don't go through the process of actually understanding or changing who they are as a person. They more deeply ingrain the negative aspects of their personality because they feel that's what makes them special.
Yep,
Okay. And the
exactly.
trauma comes from that individual assuming that everyone has to accept them for who they are. And
Yep,
that is an irrational trauma, which can only be dealt with through therapy. Now, I'm not
yep,
saying if you're one of these people, you should run out and just jump on the first therapy bandwagon you can find, but you need it.
yep.
Period. Hail to Landrigan. What is up, buddy?
Hail.
Hail, hail. Snail Messiah also says some of them become psychologists to fix themselves by proxy. Those people are gems. Yes,
Hmm.
and while I was training to become a counselor, I encountered a lot of these people, especially in the substance abuse world. Oh my gosh, I beat my alcoholism, so I can totally help people do this.
Uh,
Have you ever considered what happens when you surround yourself with users? You start
Hmm.
having some of the old school cravings. Are
yep.
you mentally equipped to deal with that? No? Congratulations, you're no longer a part of the program. It's just one of
Hmm.
those things. An individual who becomes a psychologist to fix themselves is only going to have about a 20% success rate, in my personal opinion. And that's because the amount of self diagnosis that already happens with
Uh,
psychologists is
yep,
way too fucking high. I could
yep.
diagnose myself with 30 million different disorders just based on what day it is.
Mm,
That
yeah,
doesn't mean they're
like the modern
actually true.
world, like everyone does right now. I've talked with a lot of people through my life, and everyone is doing self-diagnosis. Oh, I have this, I have that, but do you have it on paper? Have you gone to therapy? Yada.
Yeah.
No, no, I just know I have it. Like,
Oh
how
no,
do
I did
you
a
know?
Google search.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember one person I talked with. Oh, but I went to school, to become a doctor and psychiatrist and stuff like that. It was when I went to school doing the same thing. I'm just like, yeah, I do believe you. Yeah. I actually had to go to therapy for what I had to experience. So, and I went to therapy for many years because,
Mm.
I came from my past, and I never go into detail, but, I grew up in a really violent home. And not on my dad's side, but on my mother's side. I'm always
Right.
been honest about that. And, I got bullied at school all the time. And then I got home to a psychotic mom who did beat me all the time and was just violent all the fucking time and yelled at me. And a lot of stuff happened. And at the same time, she was together with an alcoholic who wanted to beat me. He wanted to sell me off for certain stuff. It was a real traumatic experience for a really small kid. My
Sure.
dad never knew about this. He never knew about this before I told him, because I told him later on in life when I moved to my dad, because I felt safe with my dad. I never felt safe, being at home with my mom
Right.
and what happened
Interesting.
there. And because of all that, that's when like my dad told me when I moved to him, it's like you basically have no soul, like you're walking around like a soulless person. And I only had anger, and I was afraid of everything. I
Mm.
I had to ask my dad all the time if is it okay that I get food, because my
Mm.
mom she never gave me food. Like I was not allowed to like eat when I needed to. She decided everything for me, and so I was totally fucked up for so long. And when my dad found out, we went to therapy, and I did a lot of therapy, and I have done it since I was probably in 6th grade or something. Um,
Okay.
and I don't go to therapy anymore because one Norway
Yeah.
blacklisted me
Yeah.
because they can't handle truth. But my dad did everything in his power to try to do everything in his power to help me.
Mhm.
Because when he found out, I remember his rage, how he wanted to just, oof, he got mad. I remember that still. But
Well, his response in being mad that that happened to you was probably more beneficial than someone who would just sit there and be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry that happened,"
yeah,
because it emotionally validated it. Well, it validated the entire experience. And I'm not trying to put words in your mouth or anything or assume
no,
that
no, no, no,
the process that you took, but when someone responds that way to something that you already think is stupid and bullshit, it validates your experience and thus makes it easier to move on and take the next steps.
Right.
It doesn't
yeah,
fix anything, but it
no,
allows you to realize that you're one, not alone in your suffering, and
yep,
two, aren't crazy.
yeah,
Because that's one
exactly,
of the things that a lot of people going through trauma, either active trauma or past trauma, um, struggle with is understanding that um, the way you're responding may not
yep,
be um hmm, I don't my brain is breaking on the word. It might not work for you
Mhm.
like on a long term, but it's understandable and natural.
yeah,
And that allows you to actually take a slight step back and look at it as something that can over time, there's no such thing
yeah,
as an instant fix, but it can over time be um ah, why is my brain breaking? It can be alleviated to certain degrees. Now, some people
yes,
make full traumatic recovery where
yep,
they can, move on with normal, happy lives, even experience the same situations that were traumatic in the past as being
yeah,
benign. But
exactly,
it requires a proper social structure and
yeah. No, I know
social
exactly what you mean.
support structure in
No,
order to understand that.
yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. And no, it's like back in the day too, a small thing gave me hardcore PTSD. I started shaking, I started to become scared and all that kind of stuff. So especially when I was in school, because when I moved to my dad, I got bullied all the time in school, and all that bullying reminded me when I used to live at my mom's, when I got beaten up
Mm.
and all that. So I went to hardcore defense mechanisms. Like I became really violent. That's how I responded all the time. I
That's
got
very
really
common.
violent. And at the same time, the teachers that was in my school, they did not fucking care about me at all and my problems.
Yeah.
So they started yelling at me and saying I was the problem and all that. My dad got so mad. He went against the school. He was driving up there yelling at them. He got so fucking pissed at them because the way they were treating me. But I will say, after all the therapy, all the stuff I've done through life, it was 90% because of my dad I became the man I am today. Because yes, I still have certain times when people they ask me, "Are you okay?" It's like, "Are you okay?" They are worried about me or something like that. I have still a lot of the same responses I do, like "fuck you," like "fuck off." That's
Yeah.
always my response. Like, I don't want help. Just fuck off.
Yeah.
And I had an incident some days ago. We were actually on a stream, and I was a little sick. And my friends are like, "Oh, you okay, man? Maybe try to get some water." And I get the same response. And I always say that I don't try to be mean or anything. It's nothing personal. It's just like because I still have that little small PTSD that makes me like
Mhm.
I get a little bit defensive when people want to try to help me, because for me, when I was young, my mom tried to like defend me, and then yeah, she became violent.
Right.
So that's like the response that it just keeps that I still have. But yeah, for me, nothing is fixed. Like nothing is like, oh my god, it's perfect or anything like that.
Right.
But I learned how to handle it better.
Yeah. It's more
That I can.
manageable now.
Yes, exactly. And the things that I did was, find the things that interest me, that I care
Mhm.
about. It's like I have days where I feel the depression coming in, and then I'm
Mhm.
really honest with the people who watch this. I'm honest with my friends, just like the people that works in 540 or people I just stream with. Yeah, I feel like I'm starting to go down a little bit dark path at the moment, so I'm just gonna take a little break.
Mhm.
I just need to take some time for myself and just try to do something that makes me a little more happy, and just try to move that, and hopefully my depression or whatever it is going to go over in a couple of days. That's how I
Right.
try to do it, at least. But I always get mad at people who are going to be using PTSD and other mental health, on their fucking social media or their
Yep.
music and stuff like that. It's like, you don't know how it is to go through a lot of these kind of stuff. You want the fucking attention. It's the
Mhm.
same thing, I've done a lot of self-harm, and I'm not afraid to talk about that since I was a little child. I did a lot of self-harm. I never went out to tell people I did self-harm.
Well,
Never. It was all
and
in secret.
that's one of the things that, in my mind, denotes the difference between something that is a legitimate concern and something
Mhm.
that is either feigned or
Yeah.
malingered. Because, by the way, my specialty is in malingering and deception, so I'm very versed on that. But um, there, people who actually suffer from mental disorders, they don't advertise it
No.
openly. And the reason for that is because there is still a stigma attached to mental disorders that state that these people aren't normal, and
Okay.
therefore their behavior isn't acceptable. And these are flawed, idiotic ways to look at things.
Yeah.
As far as like broader society, you're dumb for thinking that mental disorders make someone defective.
Yeah.
But when it boils down to it, someone who has a legitimate mental disorder or pain doesn't openly talk about it unless they've gone through years of psychotherapy of some kind.
Yep.
Whether it be locally based psychotherapy of having conversations regularly with someone who's emotionally intelligent, or it's going to an actual credentialed and worth a damn psychologist, which is a completely different discussion because there's not
Yep.
many worth a damn psychologists
True.
out there.
True.
Not in Norway, at least.
Not even in the US, buddy. Not even in the US. The good ones cost too much and your insurance doesn't cover it. But
Yes. Same
but
here.
when you see someone openly talking about it and they say, "Oh, I've never dealt with it. I've just been managing it," that typically means they're faking it.
Yep.
And I'm not going to say that it's faking it to the point that, like, they're histrionic about it, where it's like, "Look at me, give me all the attention." But like, they
Yep.
use it as a shield.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
as an individual who suffers from persistent depressive disorder, that's, by the way, for lay people out there, that's major depression that's lasted for longer than 2 years
Yeah.
straight. But anyway, my brain broke again. Damn it. But they don't go out, they don't advertise it, they don't shove it in people's faces, and most of the time disclosure comes as a necessity, not a desire.
Yeah, that's also one thing I really hated back in there because I'm younger than you guys in that kind of sense. But I do remember the Tumblr days, and at that time, people advertised, harming yourself, and they were posting self-harm stuff and all the stuff like that all the time, and how they wanted to die and all that. I was like, no, no, no. It's just like you just are seeking for fucking attention. It, it's it's heartbreaking to see that people are doing that because having mental health like a lot of us suffers from, you're not going to advertise it. It's not fun, it's not a
Nope.
luxury. um I am ashamed of course, all the times I've self-harmed and all that kind of stuff, because I wish I never did it, because it did harm
Right.
my body. I still have pain in certain places after I've harmed myself. It's just like it's permanent damages.
Yep.
Yes, there was one day in my life that I did cut myself. I was really young and stupid, and it was so deep that I fucked up some veins and stuff like that in my arm. And I never went to the hospital because I was afraid to tell anybody that I did this. I didn't want to tell anybody. And because of that, I have a damage in one of my arms for the rest of my life, so I will have pain and all that, and it's nothing I can do about it. Um, and then I see these motherfuckers out there who are advertising, oh yeah, suicide is great, cut yourself is great. No, fuck you.
It's
and then you
not.
hear these people like, oh, but the scars on your hands are sexy because it's so emo. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah. See, and that's evidence of other disordered thinking.
Yep.
Now, Snail Messiah says something here that actually plays into this quite a bit. He says, this is my pain. You are not to really see it. I wish you could, but this is my pain. And that's the thought process that every person who has suffered from a mental disorder or a hardship in their life has. It's my pain. It is real. It affects me. And it is important to my life, but you can't see it on the outside. You can't experience it. And as much as we wish that we could just lay it all out there for everybody to see, we understand that we can't do that without, for lack of a better term, losing face.
Yep.
And the losing face thought is often irrational in itself, because a lot of the times if you explain something to someone, especially if they matter to you, it will make them support you more. An individual who runs away from this kind of disclosure is not an individual you need in your life as a support structure. Play video games with them, hang out with them, have a drink, whatever. Don't rely on them. And that's big thing.
The thing with me is I don't know if I've overcome it, but I've learned to wrestle with it over the years, where I did discover my having a clinically diagnosed condition. However, in all the times I've gone to visit various physical therapists, they go, we don't see anything wrong with him. So I'm like in a rock and a hard place where I could do a lot of things, and my mom's telling me, why don't you apply for SSI and things? I go, Mom, I've been able to do things. Yeah, it takes me longer to figure it out from a neurophysiological perspective. I may need more reps to get to that point of precision in doing a certain act. One of the things that I've learned is this concept of body feel, where I'm trying to do a lot of things with my head up and I'm facing forward, so I'm relying a lot. I may need more reps, and it's like, that's my reality. But I think the elephant in the room is people don't want to hear, well, you're going to have to overcome it somehow, that there's going to be some personal effort or want to on your part to deal with it. It's like, can we not live in the both? And yeah, you have an affliction, but part of the affliction and the personal want to is, okay, you may have to take a medication that may alleviate whatever needs to be alleviated, but at the same time, there's still that personal dimension where the stigma about me is like, once I disclose it, am I going to be disqualified? As much as, because I told my mom, I said, I don't feel in good conscience that I could fill out an application for such a benefit where there are other people who could definitely use it. Me, I count the number of things I do physically. I do martial arts. I study different types. I do ninja tricks in the warehouse. I've done that. So it's like, I'm not to the point where I need to rely on that. And the fact that I can cognize so much stuff. I earned a degree, I earned a 2-year degree. I got my 4-year degree. I did attempt a master's, but it's like I'm not as disabled as the clinical diagnosis would indicate. So it's like that straddling, you know what I mean? It's like one half, you got to have a personal want to in doing what you need to do, but also this belief in your ability to overcome.
Right.
I mean, and all the trauma I've experienced being raised, my sisters and I, we joke about it to this day. Like, yeah, maybe at some point in my life, I still had this sense of trauma and horror. But at the same time, years go by, and my parents and I, we end up not laughing about it, like overlook it, but we understood what happened. But we can, at the end of the day, we can crack a laugh or two about it. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that stands in the way of a lot of people seeking help or seeking treatment, or even just recognizing that they have a problem, is they'll use a comparative principle like Lester. And I'm not digging on you, bro, just saying. But the comparative principles oftentimes allow us to minimize our own experiences to the point that we don't think we need outside intervention. Now, obviously, Lester is managing his stuff very well. If he wasn't, he probably wouldn't be here talking with us right now. But there's a lot of people who use minimization as a defense mechanism to not admit how severe their experiences are. And that comes to the self-awareness portion of trauma, is if you aren't aware of all the little processes that are making you feel this way, you're going to be wholly ineffective in dealing with it. Now, through martial arts or mindfulness or anything like that, you develop a better understanding of yourself. So there are certain things you can do to increase your self-awareness. But most people think they are already self-aware, when in reality they are delusionally self-aware, where they're willing to admit to certain key aspects of their personality or their life, but they're running away from the major ones that need to be dealt with in order to alleviate the actual suffering caused by mental disorders.
Right.
Exactly. And also with the martial arts aspect, you will also find your chi, your inner chi. You can find out so much about yourself of doing all of this. And that also was one of the things that I did when I did martial arts and still do. And that have helped me a lot, because you find out so much more about yourself, your inner chi. You can find, more the calmness, and there's so much in it that is just, it's a magical experience in a way. You're going on a magical experience. That's how I want to explain it in my view on it. And one thing I was thinking about is that also with trauma and mental health and all that, we men are looked down on a lot of times, because we hear it all the time. You're a man, just take it. It is what it is. You're a man. Be a man about it. Don't
man
cry.
Up.
Yeah.
Man up.
Yeah.
But that's not how it works. But
it's not. And you're absolutely right. Men do have a harder time with traumatic stuff or with mental illnesses in general, simply because we are expected to be a pillar of strength in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
I myself am willing to admit that I'm a weak person when it comes to my disorders. They break me, and I wind up taking entire weeks off. But these things are necessary in order for me as a man to function within my daily life.
Yeah.
And that's what most people don't realize, is that if you can't admit that there's an issue there, you can't solve the issue. It's just like
Exactly.
in addictions, people say the first step is admitting you have a problem.
Yep.
This is an umbrella that covers all mental illness, especially trauma. If you're like, even if you don't know the source of the trauma, if you
Yeah.
can at least recognize that you're having a traumatic response, it gives you a starting point on how to get through it. Because the fear of coming out and talking about it is one thing. And then, of course, Christian Delorme, he says, I got my disorder in the 80s. I don't tell anyone. I
Right.
missed out on 2 high school reunions because of
Mm.
shame. Now,
Mm.
shame regarding a mental disorder is one of the biggest things that stops people from seeking help in any way, shape, or form, or even admitting that they have a problem. And a lot of
Mm.
that comes from the belief that people, or especially men, are supposed to be stronger than your average human, despite the fact that we are average fucking human beings. You know, I'll
Yes.
tell you, I'm a normal dude who just happens to have a better understanding of himself than the
Mm.
next guy.
Yeah.
That's the only difference between me and a normal person.
Is a lot of the things with this clinical diagnosis I've lived with since I knew about it is that I was on the receiving end of the treatment that I did not want, where this is the reason why I don't disclose it I don't make it public. But for those who know me, and I feel like I should kind of explain where I'm at, I just let them know this is what I've lived with for a number of decades since I was
Mm.
young, and the reason why I tell them the reason why I don't. And a lot of times I go, I get it. You they can tell that some can tell like, oh yeah, you might need a more reps to do a certain action well. But it's not something where, and growing up as a kid, like being taken aside, the
Mm.
stigma about that, being taken aside, doing what is called adaptive PE, and then also knowing that I didn't know I had this, but I actually went and saw a speech pathologist. I thought it would just like help my word pronunciation, and then I'm like, whatever. I'm just doing what I'm told. Especially when they go, Lester, so and so is here. Okay,
Right.
but the social stigma that's a big deal, especially depending on what grade level we're talking about.
Yep.
Right, elementary school, it's like, I don't know, just go there. And especially with the immature grade schoolers, they're like, you're this. One of the more common things is they would attach MO before my name. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, you already
Yeah.
get that.
Right.
Yeah. No, exactly. No, with my father too, he never understood that he had traumatic experience and stuff like that. Like he never thought about it until he was older. And it was because of me he started thinking about that when I told him what happened
Hmm.
at my mom's house.
Mhm.
And then he also started to understand that through his life, he has actually gone through stuff himself. But, he's always been, I need to be a man about it. I need to be like this. And, because, he's an old generation and stuff like that. But he started to be more honest and open and actually just like, you know what, I actually have, depression. I actually have certain stuff here and there that I'm actually never really thought about because, I grew up as a man,
Mhm.
because for me, the one thing that made my dad realize that he actually had depression was because when he found out that I did harm myself because
Mm.
I was visiting him and he was asking in the summer why you wearing hoodies all the time and long sleeves all the time. It's like
Mm.
super fucking warm and it made no sense.
Okay.
And at one night I was so depressed and I ended up hurting myself and my dad found out. I couldn't hide it. And then he saw it, he fixed up, and he also told me, about his old best friend who committed suicide many, many years ago when he was a little younger than me, if I don't remember wrong. And then, the things that started coming in his head of his past and why he actually suffers from what he has suffered from because
Mm.
he walked in the house seeing his best friend dead.
Yeah.
And my dad is like, oh, he tries to be still a little bit a man about it, but he knows that I understand that. He
Yeah.
does think about it, but that's like what opened his mind a lot more. So for him, just talking with me and having the connection me and my father have, we are best friends in that kind of sense.
Right.
So for him, it helped him to just have me and talk about whatever in our minds. So that's the thing that helps me and my dad, is that we are best friends. We talk about every aspect of our lives,
Mhm.
from the beginning of time when we were
Mm.
young to when we were older, uh, and just sharing our experience and understand each other. And one thing I like about my dad, because hopefully he
Might
will
have had
come
some
back.
connection issues. Hopefully
Might
he'll
be.
come back soon.
Yes. No. So where was I? So yeah. So
That
we
social
help.
support structure is incredibly important.
It really is, and no, it has helped my dad a lot out and me a lot out, and no, it's like that's why I love him. He's also the one who did teach me to be strong, and also our great grandmother. That's what she always, because she experienced a lot of trauma back in the day. She lived in the
Oh
World War
yeah,
II,
right.
and she was a Romani. She was not, a white
Mm.
person, and she was a
Yeah,
Romana gypsy. They were not really liked in no places. People
right.
forget about them. But the way she was thinking, no matter how much trauma she had and what she has seen, life's too short, make the most of it, is what she always said to me and my father. And that's the way she always thought. It's like, no matter how hard stuff can be and how depressed, whatever, you just remember that life is too short and you try to be strong and you will manage it. No matter what battles you are going to fight, just battle them, no matter how hard it is. If you have to go through hell a whole year or years, do that to get the understanding and learning from the experience you have. And maybe you can take that experience, share it with others. Maybe you can help other people out there to understand. Yeah, so many layers in the whole statement that she told us. So,
For sure. And one of the things that I like to focus on while we're talking about these is certain ways to alleviate suffering. Now, Snail Messiah brings up, hey, there's Lester. What's up, buddy?
hey there.
Browser took a crap and closed all my windows.
Nice. Gotta love when that happens.
Yes.
But so, in order to deal with trauma, um, the first step is self-awareness.
Yep.
And Snail Messiah brings up a very important thing here. He says, my Buddhist training has saved my mental ass through a lot of depressive episodes and other delightful mental bullshit.
Yeah.
It's not a cure. It simply gives me strong tools to work with.
Yep.
That's actually one of the main things that any psychotherapist should focus on is,
Mm,
um, there goes my brain again.
I,
Mindfulness training.
mhm.
yep.
Don't know why that, but yeah,
It
mindfulness
happens.
training. Yeah. You need to be aware of every aspect of yourself because you can't fix broken pieces if you don't know where they are.
Yep.
And the big thing there is mindfulness training, whether it be through Buddhist teachings or something along the lines of internalized meditation, where you focused on your bodily health, muscle
Yeah.
groups,
Like
breathing.
martial arts in a way, Tai
Yeah,
Chi.
martial arts is a definitely great one to go with. Tai Chi is amazing for
Yep.
bodily awareness.
Yep.
Um, yoga is also a great thing as
Yep.
long as you go in with the right mindset. Um,
I
and
would
that's a
also
weird
say
thing to say, but
dancing. Dancing also
oh,
is a
dude,
really good one
it
because I
really
used
is.
to be a
And
dancer, and that have also helped me a lot through it. Because
yeah,
you're living in a magical world. It's just music and you and the dancing. That's what it is. You're
indeed.
living in a different world, and that can help you a lot too.
I wanted to bring continue. Well, before my browser took a crap, talking about the manning up aspect, and one of the things,
Mm.
especially having been involved with my church and the traditions I've encountered living within my specific parish community, this idea of I I I get it. I understand that we're raising a different kind of male, and so a lot of people like to pit beta male versus alpha male, and I don't even know where the whole thing about a beta male came about, but basically a wuss, right? And this idea of manning up. Every per- so I look at it from a person perspective, not so much sex perspective, biological male. Yeah, there are certain things within a male sphere that allow them to be males. Not every male is called to be an alpha male. Okay.
Facts.
So when it comes to we talked about this, particularly with certain social structures. Part of the thing is we have to man up to a degree, but does it have to be the same degree that everyone is talking about when it comes to being an alpha male? I don't know what I would consider myself, but I'm not like you and I have had these conversations. Like I love a lot of stuff like military, wrestling, athletics, but I always take a back seat and say, well, I'm not like I would have loved to be on the wrestling team, but I just didn't see myself within that. I hate to use the term, but I'll use it. Jock culture.
Right.
I've never seen myself like that because people look at me, they know I'm a quasi brainiac about stuff. But that brainiac also allows me to appreciate, especially with the eyes that I have acquired over the years, that I have grown an appreciation of those athletic feats. But I still don't associate myself with jock culture. That's just how I'm disposed. Just likewise, when it comes to certain musical genres, like I like hip hop and rap, but I as much as I tried, I couldn't. It's like
you didn't see yourself in the culture.
And likewise with metal, when I like my Metallica and all that, but I didn't see myself in the culture. And it is like there is a way to do it, and you can't do it all alone. And that's the importance of having a good support circle. Like Jason, thankfully your dad was there for you, and I empathize with the rage you felt when you told him what you told him about what was going on, because that is like what they call righteous indignation. When there's an unjust thing happening. So this whole idea of manning up, people don't have. There's a degree to which they do that sufficiently within their person. I'm talking about person, not just gonads. It's just not everyone is disposed. I don't know. If my parents raised me differently, I probably wouldn't be
the man you are now.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. I was just using that to highlight what you were saying. It comes down to character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also one thing that was asked, that was what I was going to say before, and I forgot it. But what I like about my dad is that he's honest, and he always says, yes, I don't understand what you're going through. I don't understand completely all these kind of aspects. And that for me is helping, because like you're not trying to cater and pretend you know everything, but you are just honest about it. It's like you try to understand as much as you can, and you want to be there for me instead, and try your best. And that's what matters, because I hate when people are like, yeah, I understand what you're going through. Yes, I understand. And I'm like, do you really though?
Yeah.
Like we all are different on this aspect.
And like that comes down to the difference between sympathy and empathy.
Yeah.
Because sympathy is someone can appreciate what you're going through. Empathy is someone can understand what you're going through. People use the word understand out of context too much. Improperly. But go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, no, so for me, I think everybody out there, if you have a friend who has problems and stuff like that, never say that you understand them like that. Just be honest and say that you might not understand everything, what they're going through.
Yep.
But the most important thing, be there for them.
Yep.
Be there. That's all we are asking for, that then you show that you're caring. You might not understand it all, but you are there, and that is the most important part. Yep. And also with that whole Buddhist thing, everyone finds their religion that can always help them, and give them more strength to do certain stuff. And for me too, the last year and everything, I started, practicing Norse paganism, and I started to find myself more in that. And I can say a lot of stuff in my life just made more sense for me.
Right.
And that also gave me a lot more strength to understand a lot more what I'm going through and my understanding of the world. So that helped me out a lot.
Yeah,
so if there is something you believe in, focus on that, and maybe it will give you a lot more strength to overcome more. It might not fix everything, of course, but it will help you to a degree.
Well, and that's actually one of the things that most therapists would actually push, in my opinion, or should push, in my opinion, is the idea that man is not the greatest creation in the world. And understanding that there are higher forces than you allow you to process what's going on in your life easier. I won't explain how that happens because I don't fully understand it myself, but it does work. And this is a great segue to get into certain ways to alleviate the suffering from trauma and stuff. Christian Delorme, for instance, said, I find music, lyrics, and the ins and outs of the art helps a lot. Music is amazing for therapeutic purposes, but you have to understand that you have to pick music for the mood, not a mood for the music.
Right.
Meaning that if you are listening to sad music while you're sad, you're going to stay sad.
Oh, you are.
you know, you have to be able to transition the emotions into more manageable affectations, for lack of a better term. For instance, I find when I'm in a depressive mood, death metal helps me a lot. The rage aspect of it and the overall feeling of transitioning emotions into another state is incredibly helpful. Now, if you're a religious person, when you're feeling sad or something like that, you might listen to religious music, which is usually a little more uplifting than, say, listening to Linkin Park cutting themselves and crying in the shower. But
or Mayhem.
Right. But what it boils down to with the music is it also allows you to make a connection with another individual that actually may understand what you're going through.
Right.
And that alleviates the feeling of being alone, even if you are still physically alone or socially alone in the suffering at the moment. The music allows you to understand that you're not, in fact, alone and that other people have gone through this and that it can be managed.
Right.
Now, Snail Messiah, being amazing, he says it's worth looking into a trained therapist. So far, it shows promise and results. And I know that's out of context for what he's talking about, but I did that on purpose for a reason. You want a trained therapist. Don't go to a shingle hanger. In the state of Colorado, here in the United States, for instance, if you pay like $85, you can be a registered psychotherapist. No training, no credentials, no oversight. But if you can hang a shingle and say that you help people. This, of course, still opens you to all of the medical liability that you hold for being a practicing counselor, but it doesn't. I mean, so you don't want to look for someone who's a registered psychotherapist. You want to look for someone who is a practicing counselor or someone who is a specific therapist. I personally have a bias against psychiatrists because of their reliance on chemical intervention. You can go see a psychiatrist and they'll help you process it. But you want to make sure that their credentials are not only valid, but up to date, because continued education is a requirement for a reason. And that's because understanding changes all the time. Speaking of which,
if you live in Norway, never go to DPS in Norway. They will blacklist you just for stupid reasons. So if you live in Norway, you have to pay. You have to pay some money to find the better ones.
Noted.
Indeed. And so Snail Messiah brings up, he says, on the news yesterday, they talked about a new therapy using moving light. They treat PTSD and the treatment takes a week and replaces years of therapy. It originated in Holland. I am familiar with this. It is, in fact, called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is EMDR. It uses light. What it does is it bilaterally stimulates your brain by taking a light and moving it from one spot to another and then back again. And what the therapist does, originally EMDR was actually a bilateral stimulation of physical senses instead of eye movement, tapping on the knees back and forth while the person describes their trauma and relives specific events. I'm not 100% sure as to why this happens, but the eye movement desensitization process allows the individual to focus on something else, and it decreases the emotional intensity of the response. Now, finding someone who is qualified in EMDR and affordable is damn near fucking impossible. But it is one of the most effective modern treatments that you can find for trauma. That being said, if it's a low-level trauma, and I know that's a weird thing to say, but if you revisit some of our discussion earlier, there are low-level traumas.
Yep.
If you have a low-level trauma, you can do things as simple as going to a CBT session, cognitive behavioral therapy, to have them work on what thought processes lead to the traumatic responses. You can use certain tools such as thought stopping, identifying, stopping, and replacing the thoughts that cause the traumatic response to become initiated, or your trigger mechanisms. And this is very, very important to understand, because if you were to couple CBT with EMDR, your recovery rate might be 100%. The problem there, of course, is you're probably not rich enough, if you're anything like us, to afford EMDR. And having a competent, trained cognitive behavioral therapist is also incredibly hard to do, because cognitive behavioral therapists, while they are usually effective, get hung up on their own biases towards treatment. And that's something you have, they're not open to other forms of treatment being utilized during the process of CBT. That's where the competence and training of a therapist matter. That being said, self-medicating is not usually a good way to go about it, but depending on the substance that you're using, it can help you lessen the effectiveness of a traumatic response. This, of course, you want to avoid anything that directly impacts your decision-making skills, such as alcohol, methamphetamines, certain types of weed, for sure. For instance, if you suffer from anxiety, you probably don't want to smoke a sativa. Just saying. But there are certain substances out there that are not psychopharmacology that can help you. This is the reason we're looking at using magic mushrooms to treat PTSD here in Colorado. It's already been approved and being tested in Denver right now. But it's over-reliance on a single method that usually does people more harm than good. You have to be able to recognize that there's not any such thing as a single solution method. You won't fix all your problems with a single therapy session. You won't fix all your problems with 100 therapy sessions. You won't fix all your problems with the same therapy stretched out over several years. You have to be able to have an adaptable modality for your needs. That, of course, is something you have to take up with your treatment professional, and I will not give you any guidance as to finding a treatment professional, because that's a pain in the ass. But it's true. You guys, you can't do a one-stop shop fixing. But hail to John Edgar. Sorry I missed this earlier. He says, I wish I could have caught this. I'm at work. Much respect to Corey for having streams like this. We'll have to catch the replay. Well, thank you, John Edgar, for stopping in, and thank you for catching the replay. I do hope you're having a wonderful day. And if you're not, I hope it gets better. Snail Messiah says, problem also is with having these issues for so many years, it becomes a part of you. You're not sure you want to get rid of it. This is where the readiness for change comes in. Recognizing that the issue is long-term and possibly, according to your own mind, an irreconcilable, you can't fix it. A lot of people think you can't fix it. Everything can be fixed. And I don't mean fixed as in it's brand new, but it can be alleviated to the point that it is no longer impacting your life. I have seen amazing work with Vietnam vets that has made them go from homeless, violent drug addicts to fully functional, upstanding members of society because they refused to give up. And that's where it comes in. That's one of the key things that people don't understand is you have to stay at it. Feeling better does not mean you're fixed. And that's like, oh, I'm feeling better, so I don't have to go anymore. No, you're feeling better because right now you're starting to understand. Once the understanding has taken hold, you'll actually recognize that. But feeling better is not solving your problems. But they can be solved. And as far as the you're not sure if you want to get rid of it portion, that comes down to your personal decision on whether or not the experience is impacting your life to unmanageable levels. And as hard as it can be to deal with long-term, heavily ingrained PTSD, it is possible to do so, especially with tools like EMDR. It becomes much easier to do so. I personally think that chemical intervention coupled with therapy is a good practice, but chemical intervention should be a last resort in most cases. Especially when there's an imbalance. Of course, this depends on the type of disorder that you're dealing with, et cetera, et cetera. But overall, if you start with the therapy and allow the therapy to start taking hold before making the decision to move to medications, it is typically 70% more effective than just doing one or the other by themselves without continued modification of a treatment plan. But Snail Messiah says, not going to say what drugs, but in DK, we're doing studies using special meds to overcome deeper PTSD with great results. And drugs can help. I'm not one of those people that's going to be like, drugs are bad, okay? Because I am a fucking user. I'll admit that right now. I smoke weed every single day. I have reasons for it, but that's none of your business. It's just one of those things that drugs can be helpful. That comes down to a dependency discussion later on, and of course we're already over our time frame, but it's not a hard discussion to have. Maybe we'll have it some other time. He says, you guys are good background while I deliver. Thank you, Christian. I'm glad we can entertain you in the background. But any closing thoughts from you guys on our discussion?
No, it's just something that trauma, like you mentioned, comes in varying degrees and depths. And knowing how to appropriately assess that's kind of been the thing for I don't know how many decades now, is like, when's the trauma clinical? If it is clinical, how do you best treat it? And especially with what I've encountered, and I just listened to a Jocko Willing podcast last year about a former Navy SEAL who ended his own life because he wasn't getting the help he needed. It was just, you do your diligence, you man up and get the help you need, but when the help isn't, I think it also would have to be on the professionals themselves to kind of man up and understand what they're giving the person is. Okay, let's go ahead and circle back. Like my dad, when I think it was, he started going to the VA and going through the VA, and they gave him a steroid, and like he had a reaction to it. So good on the professionals, like, oh, we got to change it up a little bit so he doesn't. And
right.
And so
exactly.
It's that back and forth, and there are many aspects to resolving that. And it's like, use all the help you can get, medical, interpersonal, with your support groups. If you have one, hopefully you do have one.
Hopefully.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And to those of you who don't have a social support structure, it doesn't have to be a physical social support structure. Yeah. There are plenty of online resources you can utilize. Even if it's just discovering random people on YouTube and having wonderful discussions with them, it helps a lot just to know that there's someone else in your life. So even if you have to connect with them through a computer, do so.
Yep.
Couldn't say better myself.
Any thoughts from you there, Jason?
No, we have said everything, and Lester said what I was thinking on a lot of stuff, and so did you. So it's not much more to say about it.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I guess we're going to wind down now. Thank you all for this riveting discussion, and thank you to everyone, Jason, Lester, and everyone in the chat who was willing to share with us today. I applaud your bravery, because it is a hard thing to share this type of stuff. And I also want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for helping make this show awesome. On a personal note, this last week was really fucking hard for me. I won't get into super details, but I will be back full force this week. Hell or high water, I will be doing my shit. That being said, tonight, I don't know if it's going to be a Dick's News or if it's going to be another Corey's Corner, but we will be on tonight at 6 p.m. Mountain Time to do some shit. I don't know. It might even be a general everybody can join kind of thing. But, and then, of course, the Meltdown tonight. Wednesday, I will be on Christian Delorme's channel. Check that out. We're talking Rush, Part 2. From Moving Pictures to their most recent album.
Nice.
And then, of course, Thursday we'll do the more stuff here. But I hope today's episode was beneficial for someone in some way. I hope it didn't come across as a bunch of crazy ranting and raving about random shit that nobody knows what they're talking about. I hope it actually came out somewhat like understandable. Especially since my brain keeps breaking and I can't come up with words. It's great. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I do hope that you have a wonderful day. So make sure you stay sexy and don't get murdered. Because then you wouldn't be able to come and join us. But
Exactly.
I think Mental Health Mondays are going to become a regular thing because there's plenty to talk about and we have some great in-depth discussions about stuff.
And mental health is important to talk about in the right way.
It is indeed. And Snail Messiah says, loved the episode, very wholesome. Other than talking about parents eating each other, yes. But anyway, guys, we will catch you later. Take care of yourselves and have a good one.
Two.